Uh, we may just have you come up with your laptop. Your firewall doesn't like our firewall. Seven. Do you need the... Sacrum is on Friday? No. Oh.
We're expecting a large amount of attendance.
There's our baby.
Sorry, could you describe? I do have the website what they or they ask if I share.
Oh, you don't have a... Oh, and she just came by to ask. What? Okay, so do you have a dongle for his computer so he can project?
It's an HDMI.
HDMI.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I will try and...
Thank you.
No problem. I should be more prepared, right?
No. We will continue in the discussion, so we appreciate that very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Where? Ah, this is HDMI. Ta-da! Okay. No, I'm USB-C. But I have it. So I just downloaded the first one. Yeah, but we have one in the back just for new people coming in. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Oh, are you taking the other one, or?
You want me to take it?
As long as we have one, we should be good. Is the blue sheet in the back?
Thank you.
Oh, it's right there. So if you can take one, and we'll take one. Yeah. Thank you. So you're all set?
Yes. Okay. I'm pretty quiet, so I'll be discussing.
You're so funny. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Cool. And he even got that working. All right. Sorry about the delay. We can go ahead and get started. So for those of you, just so you know, this is the MILE working group, just in case, because we had people that were in the wrong room. Okay, next slide. This is the new note well. I'm not going to read it to you. That's our standard note well. So for today, we just want to give you the brief update of where we are with the current drafts and our milestones, which I think we are getting close. And then Stephen is going to present the updates to the Rowley draft, which is hopefully completing the last call, and I'll probably ask for a couple more reviews while I do the write-up and shepherd it. And then I'll hand over the chair to Take-san so I can give you a quick update on the XMPP grid draft. And then Take, will you or Mia will present the updates to the guidance draft with some comments to the, Take will provide updates and comments to the version 2 of the IODEF schema. And then one last added, if we have time, is to start the discussion. So I don't know how many of you, perhaps show of hand, have been tracking discussions in the TLS working group. Yeah, Kathleen, I don't think yeah. So there's been, basically the issue revolves around being able to decrypt, I guess at a proxy level, right? In the TLS 1.3 and issues around that. And so there's been a lot of discussions around the architecture, which could effectively affect us if we're trying to get some insight for the incident reporting. So if we have time, we'll open up the mic to see if there are any questions or issues that we need to discuss, right? And perfect. So Kathleen, maybe you could start with providing us with a summary, and then we'll open up the mic. So with that, let's give you a quick status of where we are. So where you look at the work that we've been chartered to do with respect to the data modeling, the data representation, we've got the IODEF drafts which have been published. We've been talking about the different transports, the 2 new drafts under construction and working group last call have been Rowley and XMPP grid. They did go through working group last call. I think Rowley is much more mature, so we can talk and ask our area director, Kathleen, if we can just move it forward, given that the authors have provided an updated draft. Was it this morning? Yes. So I'm not even going to ask for who's read it yet. And then Mia has been providing some updates on the IODEF, right? Which we'll get an update on that as well. So I think, given our milestone dates, we are pretty much on track. Given that there were substantial rewrite of the XMPP grid, I think it's fair, and I know I'm speaking as chair, that we should go through another last call for the XMPP grid draft. And we can discuss whether we're ready for the Rowley as well, for that to be shepherded through. And then Dave and Stephen, you were going to put a CSER draft for Rowley? Yes. And when you get to it. Okay, so we'll discuss that. So this is the proposed timeline for the current drafts. So I think with that, Stephen, did you get his slides? No, you did? They're in the mic. Oh, yeah, he's not on VPN, so I think it'll be easier. Do you mind just projecting from your? Yes. And please stand on the pink box because you're on TV. Yes, and if you want, I can flip charts for you. Oh, it's back here. want me to flip or no? Okay.
Okay, you got it.
No, that's why the screen is there.
Oh, that's what I want. Okay. Okay, I'm Stephen Banghart from NIST. I'm going to give a presentation about the current status of the two ROLI drafts that are here in the MILE working group. The first one that I'll be talking about is the ROLI core draft that specifies the actual ROLI transport itself. And I'll be talking a little bit about the ROLI CCERT extension that's here as well. So we went through working group last call and got quite a lot of good feedback. We were actually very, very happy with the responses that we got, and we feel like we improved the document a lot. So immediately following working group last call, we pushed out a -07 version that included the vast majority of those changes. And to quickly run through those changes so everyone can kind of keep track of the deltas here, the first thing we did was we received some comments that the front matter of the document was a little bit weighty. So we went and reworked the front matter, reworked the introduction, and made everything a little bit more concise, made it flow a little bit better. Hopefully, if it's your first time reading the document, it goes a little bit smoother now. So that's one of the things that if you're reviewing it now is to look at is the new front matter. The second major change that happened after working group last call was that we switched our URL templating to the /.wellknown IANA registration. That's a IETF standard that specifies that if you're laying out a URL pattern for well-known URLs, that you should register it to this /.wellknown registration. So for service document retrieval, it is now spec'd out that that will happen at the server root /.well-known/service/ROLI/service document. And that's all described in the spec. This is more compliant to IETF guidance now. Along with that IANA registration, we also registered a few more things in the IANA tables that we'd already established. We just filled in a couple more initial values. So there are now local registrations in there. So to make a namespace that is just designated 100% for local use of both property and category. We also registered at that time one initial property, which was content author name. I'll be talking a little bit more about that on the next slide. We added a privacy consideration section. This was again in line with recent IETF guidance that we should be adding privacy considerations. So that's all new text in that section. Talks a little bit about how just how information stored in ROLI, sent over ROLI can cause breaches of privacy, cross-referencing information to resolve identity, things like that. So there's some considerations there in that section. And then there was a big stack of editorial, grammatical, sentence structure changes from working group last call. We accepted almost all of those and hopefully made the document a lot better. So this update was pushed out about 2 months ago after the working group last call. Following the working group last call, we actually received a decent amount of review during a requirements review process of ROLI. And we wanted to get that feedback into the document before it went on to the next step of publication. So just this morning, we got that update in. And we produced the -08 version of ROLI. And this is integrating the last of the review that we got that was after the working group last call, but we felt was important enough to get in before it started to move forward. So as a quick overview, I'm not going to go into intense detail of these changes because none of these changes changed normative requirements, which is notable. These are all editorial changes. We clarified a couple requirements, but there is no explicit requirement changes in -08. We rewrote a couple of the sections, namely APP collection and Atom feed, to make those not only flow a little bit better, but to also explain our intent a little bit more clearly so that reading it the first time, you understand a little bit better what it means to be a ROLI feed and what it means to be a ROLI collection. So hopefully those sections are a little bit clearer now. There's a decent amount of new non-normative text in those sections. There was a kind of errant extra requirement in the security considerations section that had actually already been covered in the earlier parts of the document, but that had kind of made its way down into security considerations. So we went ahead and resolved that, so that duplicate requirement was not there. We did some more clarification of the TLS requirements section. We've been iterating on that pretty much every update. We feel like it's in a pretty good place now. We've clarified and really kind of made clear our intentions for the TLS requirements. And then we also did some more clarification to make the RID requirements more clear as well. There was no actual requirement changes. We just kind of did some semantic wordsmithing to make sure that everything came across as clearly as possible. Then, more notably, we registered 3 more properties so that the property table, when Rolly publishes at this moment, the property table will have 4 initial values just from the core. Of course, extensions may add to that, but for now we have 4. And that is the content author name from 07. That is a property that allows people to expose either the name of the author or the name of the organization that created the piece of content you're talking about. We registered property content ID, which is a way to expose an identifier from the content. We registered publish date and updated date, which fairly self-explanatory, allow you to expose the date that the content was originally published if it's different than the date that the Rolly entry is published, and it allows you to expose the date that the content was updated, again assuming that it's different than the date that the Rolly entry was updated. We actually discovered that these properties would be useful to add in the process of helping other working groups write Rolly extensions. We were working on some other extensions and found that these properties are useful to register in the core so that every single extension doesn't have to register them for themselves. And this will help interoperability, hopefully, and allow these registrations to be done in the core. So, and then 08 also includes a smaller batch of editorial, grammatical, and wordsmithing changes that aren't really important enough to mention. So at this point, we would like to ask the working group and the chairs as to what the next steps are for this Rolly core document. Obviously, no one has read the new updates yet because it just went out a couple hours ago. So if you have read it, I should buy you a beer or something. That's amazing. So we need to probably have a few people read through some of the changes, but none of them are normative changes. They're all editorial, they're all grammatical, they're all sentence structure. So what is the feeling in the room over here at the desk on kind of what we should do here?
Well, I think we got a lot of the substantial comments through last call. I think if I recall, the ones that came after were more, I would put in a minor category.
Yes.
So I think the next step would be Kathleen as the area director to review it, and as the chair and the shepherd, I should probably review it. I'm not sure that we need to do another full working group last call. We can open it up for another couple weeks, but yeah.
So Kathleen Moriarty, area director, who's not that tall. So if you just want to do your
The write-up.
Shepherd write-up and
Yeah.
then toss it over to me into IESG review.
Okay.
I will do my review, and then you can address those comments, and then we'll do IETF last call, and then from there it goes to IESG review. Pretty simple. So thanks
There
for
you
your
go.
work on this.
Yeah.
Okay, of course, yeah.
And everyone in the room for reviewing and helping.
Yeah, of course. And as always, more review, more questions, more comments, more than welcome.
Oh, trust me, you will get more comments.
I look forward to it. Been working on this for a while. I want to make it as good as it can be. If anyone is interested in writing extensions for this, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'm helping a couple other people put together extensions as well for other information types or any other registrations in the Rolly space. So please don't hesitate to shoot me an email or stop me here this week and talk to me about it. Or if anyone's doing any kind of implementation work, anything like that, I'd love to hear about it. So that's more or less, yeah, go ahead.
Brett Jordan. So I'd like to get, I want to work with you a little bit offline, not here, waste time, but I'd like to get a little bit more information on the direction that Rolly is going to go long term.
Okay.
As chair of taxi in a different standards body, I would like to see a convergence at some point between
Convergence of what?
of functionality
Between what?
uh,
Taxi and
between
Rolly?
taxi and Rolly, because they're similar kind of concepts. So I would just like to discuss that at some point.
So I would have to say that's really not in scope for Mile. That would be something that would be done off. Yeah.
So Kathleen Moriarty, I'm happy to have that conversation. Probably doesn't need to be, we can even have a small group to help with that, but there are different transport protocols. So doing convergence might be very difficult and might result in interoperability problems would be my concern. This taxi involves, at least last I looked at it, and it's been a while for me, so I could be wrong, multiple transports that it accepts, right? Oh, they've changed it.
Yeah, Taxi
Oh.
2.0, I haven't
Okay,
been
I
keeping
haven't
up.
kept up, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
And that they had, yeah, so I think they would have, had they continued down that path, it would have been big interoperability problems. So it's good to hear.
And I just want to investigate.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to investigate what the possibilities are and what things can do to make it so vendors, if I do have to work for a vendor, that it makes it easier for product managers to adopt things.
Okay, so I think many of us would need an overview of what
Right.
taxi is today.
Yep.
To see what is possible. So if you can help with that, maybe that would be good. Thank you.
Dave Woltermeyer, couple responses, I guess, to that. Would it make sense to do that overview in the next Mile meeting? An interim, maybe? Yeah, I wouldn't want to wait that long. The other question is, or I guess the other thing I was going to say was, so I've looked at Taxi 2.0. I think Stephen's actually participating in that committee. We would like to see, personally would like to see Rolly used as a transport for sticks. I think one of the major differences between Rolly and Taxi is that Taxi is JSON based, and Rolly uses AtomPub and Atom syndication format, which is XML based. One of the things I've been talking with some of the original authors about, the original authors of Atom and Atom syndication and AtomPub, like Mark Nottingham as an example, about is how we might be able to update Atom syndication and AtomPub in order to provide a JSON-based model in addition to the XML model. Because the way AtomPub works, you can request which format you want your entry or your feed in. The only real possible way to do it right now is to request an XML version, because that's all that's defined by the IETF. But it does have some of the flexibility baked in to allow you to also request a JSON version of that of a given feed or a given given entry. And so if we were able to spin up some work in the IETF around doing that, we could actually create a JSON representation, which I think would then cause it to better align with what is currently being used in Oasis. So I'd be interested in talking with the IESG about how we might be able to start some work in that regard. I think that's work that we would be interested in doing.
that might be part of the Mile Charter. I mean, we are talking about the data representations, which is part of our charter. So I guess what I'm hearing, and maybe we should just ask here and we could take it back to the mail group, if there is enough interest. I know for me, I'd like to hear an update of where Taxi 2.0 is, and then maybe have another session where there's discussion of where the complement overlap, just so we can define what it is define the gaps effectively, right? That we would have to put focus to.
So if you don't mind me jumping in really quick before we ask the room, the JSON update to Atom and Atom Pub is something that we're thinking about doing before we ever really were even familiar with the taxi space. We think that the JSON update would be useful for a lot of reasons. People like JSON these days, and being able to use Atom and Atom Pub in JSON would be useful for Rolly, regardless of the rest of this space.
Right.
So I think it's two separate interests.
Okay. So if you want to raise that interest and you want to put it in Mile, we need to discuss it in Mile so we can
Right.
add it as another
Right.
working group
No, of
thing.
course.
Right.
Yeah, and if we wanted to investigate like CBOR or Captain Proto or something like that, as a chair in Taxi and as an editor in Styx, and you mentioned you would like to see Styx transported over Rolly. I'll work with you on that as an editor, so we can
So
find some path there.
So as the Mile chair, I think we do need to put prioritization, right? So I think the first order of business is for us to identify, which to me begins with having this forum understand, so getting an overview, Brad, right, of Taxi 2.0. So the suggestion was we don't need to wait until the next face-to-face. We can put it out on the mail list. We can set up a doodle poll to pick a time. And so, Brad, I'm going to look to you as volunteering somebody to help provide with that overview. And okay, so 1 hour. Okay, so before we do this, I'd like to get, I guess, a hum. Is there enough interest in the group for us to pursue the learning of Taxi and figuring out how we do the interwork between Taxi and Rolly? Can I get a hum, please? Okay, I would say that's pretty strong. Okay, so I guess I will take the action. I'll set up I'll send an email and set up a doodle poll to get that moving. And then from there, we'll decide whether we do another interim or wait for the face-to-face. But don't let me stop you from doing side, right, progress.
Right. Well, we'd like to keep as much. I mean, it's everything we want to do publicly and transparently here. So,
Right. Well,
but we don't want to distract from.
As you
from
said, right,
Yeah.
we've got our order of business, which is we're going to move Rolly forward, right? So now the next question is whether you want to bring Rolly with JSON as the next, and that's something that we need to bring it to the group and agree as to whether that's another working item we need to put into Mile. Separate from that is the taxi work. That's the way I'm seeing it.
Sorry for being overly commented. I would like to see Rolly over JSON, simply because as a vendor, if I take off my open source, community hat and put on my vendor hat, working in a JSON environment is a lot easier, especially in the whole Web 2.0 environment that everyone's going to, and cloud-to-cloud communication going between Amazon and Google and Rackspace. XML is painfully difficult to implement these days, and it's not in the development stack of any vendor. Well, I wouldn't say any, but the vast majority of vendors, and mine is a small security company. So yes, I would be very much in favor of Rolly with a JSON-based implementation.
I'm not sure we're quite ready to bring that to a vote yet, but
So I have one more. I promised talking about the CCERT extension as well. Are we ready to go to that, or?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So at some point, I'm going to leave it to you to lead the discussion of bringing Rolly JSON, and that's when we'll ask the group. Okay.
Okay, so the other document here relevant to Rolly in Mile is the CCERT extension. There has not been a major update in a while. My time in Rolly has been working on finishing the core document to get that out and stabilized. So I've actually identified a few minor edits that I've been compiling together into a -02, but it's only very minor. So it's at least shaped correctly at the moment. It's fleshed out most of the way. There's still work left to be done. I mean, there's been no review on it. It's still a personal draft. It's just under my name. So I think what I would like to ask the group and the chairs for is working group adoption, so that we can begin to work on it as a working group and figure out how we want this extension to look.
So have we, let me ask the group, who has read this draft? So I think we need a couple more people to read the draft and before we can ask that question.
Okay.
So yeah, can we get some volunteers, please?
Yeah, I'd like to get a focus on this. Without this extension, Rolly cannot carry IODEF. I would like to make
So that
this
would be-
very clear to everybody.
So we had Chris, Roman, and Frank? Frank. Yes. On the CSERT, Rolly CSERT draft. Oh, you've read it? Okay. I think that's fine. No, I appreciate it because you're writing notes. So Roman has already read it. So it would be Chris and Frank. And I'll ask, I guess I'll send it out to the mail too for read and review.
Sure.
And
Thanks.
so Frank and Chris, when do you think, because I don't think we want to wait, huh?
It's not very long. I think right now the entire length of the document is 22 pages. About 10 of those is the appendix, which is not necessary for this stage of review probably, so it's not very long. Relatively not very long anyway. Okay.
Okay, yeah, so I'll send an email to ask for more reviews and Chris and Frank, I'm just, huh? You think by this week? Okay. So I'm going to send it out on the mail, so maybe I'll have to add another week to it.
Okay.
And then I'll pose the question to the mail,
Okay, perfect.
right?
Okay. Have I used all my time at this point?
You did, but we have time.
If the group is interested, if the chairs are interested, we used Rolly in the hackathon. If anyone would like to hear about kind of implementation report or a hackathon report on that, would anyone have any interest in that? Yes? Okay. So I have been working on is the chairs, you okay with that?
How about I give you 5 minutes?
5 minutes is more than enough. So I've been working on an implementation of Rolly. We deployed it and used it at the hackathon. We were using it to store and allow discovery of and then deploy. In this case, it was software descriptors and vulnerabilities were the information types that we were using in this hackathon demo. There were only a few implementation issues. The standard itself held up and operated. We were able to successfully send HTTP requests to the Rolly server in order to go through the service document and to parse through that to find a relevant collection and to parse through that to find relevant vulnerabilities and actually extract the content out and use it further down the workflow chain. So by all measures, the Rolly standard itself worked really, really well at the hackathon. It completely filled in the square that we needed to fill in. And we were really happy about how it operated there at the hackathon. So if anyone has any questions or comments about how it went during the hackathon or the implementation or any of that. or I worked with Dave at the hackathon, so I'm sure he has some more comments about that.
How about Dave Oltermeyer, how about I add them to the notes for you? I just wanted to add one other thing. We demonstrated the extensibility of Rolly because we also used it to serve up oval content, which was used as part of the hackathon. So, that was another type of content that we, hadn't really been, considering using Rolly to serve, and it did.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
That's good.
Now I'm done for real.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Oh, I heard that.
So the next talk is by Nancy about XMPP draft. So
Yeah, I'm also short. But thank you. Yeah, this morning I couldn't bring the poll down. Okay, so everybody knows me by now. I'm Nancy Kim Winget. So I did post a version 3 of the XMPP draft. And if anybody has looked at it, you will notice that it was a major rewrite. It has now gone from 45 pages to 20 some odd pages. So given all of the editorial comments, so thanks Adam for them, as well as Chris and Hank, long list. So all of those I addressed. The biggest, most critical feedback was its readability, that it was just too hard to discern. When you look at the history of the draft, in both the SACM group and the MILE group where it was presented, there weren't that many people familiar with XMPP. And so there was a lot of content in there that described how XMPP worked. All of that text is now gone, okay? So right now what you'll see in the text is basically saying we are using XMPP to either query or publish subscribe to obtain information. This is how you do it using XMPP. And so how you do the authentication authorization, you use this RFC. So I left the general architecture diagram. I put in a new abstract message flow diagram showing the RFCs as well as the XMPP extensions that you would use to carry the IODEF. And in fact, XMPP has already created its own namespace for IODEF. The one question that I put in the IANA considerations was whether we in MILE want to put an IANA registry for the different IODEF versions as new namespaces. Just so that in XMPP, when you want to create a topic, if you're familiar with publish subscribe mechanisms, a new stream, a new data model, right? That you know exactly which version you're talking about. So basically, I really have tried to put the clarifications in there. It is a major rewrite. The security considerations I left alone because architecturally, message-wise, all that content hasn't changed. So from a privacy and security, all of that still applies. So next slide, please. So basically, it was section 2 that has been completely rewritten, and the appendices are now gone. Okay. Where we actually were trying to show the XML messaging, all of those exist in the RFCs and the XMPP RFCs and in the JEPs. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. So to carry IODEF and XMPP, these are the basic. So there's the base XMPP protocol that's now part of an updated RFC, which includes the PubSub, but I left the publish subscribe, which is JEP 060, also referenced in there, just because there's better examples in that JEP write-up than there is in the RFC. Okay. But how you do the discovery, and now a question that I'm thinking of is, we could actually do the discovery through the XMPP discovery mechanism, they call it DISCO. We could potentially use Rolly as well, right? So that's basically the gist of the changes. Next slide. So I just wanted to give thanks for all of the feedback. I wasn't able to reach Peter St. Andre, but I did reach out to David Cridlin just to make sure that where I was going with the draft was what he was looking for. And he said, yes, you're on the right path. Okay. So I think we need to do another working group last call for it, just because it was a substantial write-up. Right. Content-wise, to me, semantically, it really hasn't changed, but hopefully it's much more readable. But now there is the explicit presumption that you go and read the XMPP drafts, right? So given that Stephen gave the readout for the hackathon, I'll also put a plug for XMPP Grid. So we also did a hackathon, or participated in the hackathon, using the I2NSF, and I forget which group, Eric Boyd. So those groups are providing information of the network devices, like topology, like session state information and configuration. So what we did was we used their pub, I'll call it PubConf, right, interface. So Huawei had a switch in their cloud in China, and we at Cisco had a switch in the US in our lab. And they were providing, so I believe the Cisco switch, we were providing just so we could show the variety of information that could be shared. So Cisco was showing, here's topology information that the switch is seeing. Huawei was showing, here's the session information that we're seeing. They were publishing it in the Yang data model, publishing it to the XMPP grid, and the XMPP grid was saying, here's this information that's available. So we didn't really have time. We were just going to put a stub application that was a consumer, but we didn't quite have time to do that. But anyway, so that was the first true interoperability of two separate data repositories across the world sharing information through XMPP grid, an instance of XMPP grid. That's it. Questions? Nope. Okay.
So is it okay? We will initiate a working group last call just after the week and try to wait for 1 month and then finalize the draft. Is it okay? If you have any objection. I don't think there's any objection. Okay, we will initiate last call again after the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so next up, I think we have Mio.
Okay. Hello. My name is Neo, and I will present the status of guidance draft. Next slide. Here's overview of this draft, and this draft aims to provide guidelines of IODEF implementation, and also about presentation of common security indicators and about use cases so far. At first, I will show status of this draft and then show updates from previous draft, and finally show to-do list. The next slide. Here is draft status. we think currently working group last goal consensus reached. And we modified the referring reviews from Adam and Roman after working group last call, thanks to Adam and Roman. And we are now waiting for Shepard write-up. I appreciate Nancy taking on Shepard. Thank you. And here are updates from the previous draft. We modified issues referring Adamson's review comment. The comment is mainly language improvements and needs throughout the draft. And then we modified issues from Roman San's review comments. We are fixing XML snippet and fix lack of consistency in preferred IODEF version of the draft. And then add a description of XML lang attribute. And also add a reference to read. And finally, language improvements throughout the draft. And Panos-san also added paragraph about language support in ML string classes. And I think to-do list is only for waiting for Shepard write-up. Is that correct? That's all.
Yeah, I think so, and I apologize for being late. So I think I just need to do the write-up because the comments, so Roman, as far as I saw your comments, they were fairly inane. So I think I'll just go ahead and do the write-up so that Kathleen can review and then move it for the ISG as well. So I think we're good to go. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
It's good. Okay.
So let me talk as well about some comments on the IODEF schema. I was also enjoying a hackathon this time. I was building a converter between Stix and IODEF and found out several schema and necessity of the change of the schema. So the first one is the easy one. The IANA registry has a schema, but the schema was somehow edited by somebody else. So we had an unnecessary space in the namespace. So I would like to change it. Maybe could I ask Roman to change the schema, or should I do that? I don't know. Just deleting space. In the namespace declaration, they had a space between languages.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we need to put an errata for that?
Kathleen Moriarty, AD. If it's just, is the same problem in the draft as well, or is it just in the uploaded
But the
schema?
draft has a schema inside, right?
Yeah.
It's a line, so in the schema itself, there's probably a line wrapping issue.
Oh.
Characters. So, but the X and but the XSD
Right.
probably should have.
Right, but I'm just more worried about in the draft because people tend to be literal.
Well, I think that, so, yeah, so there's that, but the most important thing is getting the IANA one that is
Yes.
pulled down automatically fixed. So that's something I think I can easily just approve. I don't think that'll be a big hubbub, but then we have to check to see if it's in the draft and then maybe an errata so people are aware.
Yep. Okay.
So can you fix the space issue given the line wrapping in the document?
I can check it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look. I'm not sure because I don't know whether we can make the spacing right in the document given you have the 72
That's it.
characters, but in the registry, it can obviously be fixed. So thank you for finding that.
Actually, we do have some other issue to review. So we had an example in the draft, right? So we used the example from the draft from from the RSC 7970 and also from the guidance draft. And I checked whether this can be workable, and it wasn't. We identified 3 issues here. The first one is minimum occur of the URL was defined in the thread actor class, but the schema does not allow us to omit the URL element. So we have to specify the minimum number of the occurrence. I think we have to change it in the draft as well, and also in the schema as well.
Okay, I'm feeling an errata coming.
And also for the other issue, change number 5, the enum value of the type attribute in bulk observable class do not have FQDM. But in the example, we are using FQDM, so we should change draft or schema. We can discuss about it. Well, at this moment, we can just use extension type. But the extension type, extension value, was also missing from the schema. So we have to anyway change it. So these are the 2 big issues. Yeah, is it clear? Yes, thank you. The draft was really huge, so it was not so easy to fix everything, I guess.
No, but this is good. I mean, it's great that you were able to test. And so the question is, can you work with Roman
Sure,
to
of course.
create the
I'm happy to
errata?
work with them.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So as a comment from Panos has sent an email actually 1 month ago, but I think the discussion went somewhere. So I hope you can take care of this. So he was basically saying that the language attribute is optional, but it shouldn't be optional like this. So we can just change the schema. This is something we can just discuss on the mailing list. I wanted to raise issue here. So after the meeting, I will post the slides and also this sentence from the email list and try to discuss further. It should be simple via email.
Yes. Yeah, I think for all of the issues, just raise them on the email list and say, this is the proposed resolution. And then I think, as Kathleen said, once you put the errata draft in there, it'll just put everything to the readers, and if they don't, they lose it. Yep.
So finally comment, yeah, we should change the schema and RFC. And also what I felt is maybe, again, JSON is useful. I used to work for the JSON representation, but somehow this work went somewhere. But if somebody is interested, I want to keep working with the JSON representation. I think, are there any interest of this work? If yes, I can work on that. If not, I will skip it.
So is anyone here from the LACNIC CSERT group? Anyone here from LACNIC CSERT group? No. Okay, they are interested.
Well, yeah, so I was
They're not
going to
in the
say,
room.
we've talked about the importance of JSON, and if we're going to have Rolly extend to JSON, it only makes sense to have IODEF.
Yeah, so I know it is used within the LACNIC CSERT circles.
Oh, okay.
IODEF is, and I did speak with some fellows that are here attending and who regularly attend the LACNIC meetings and their CSERT meetings, and they expressed interest. They must have a conflict that they're not here.
Okay, so let me just be formal and ask the group, does the group believe we should add the definition of IODEF with JSON? Can you please hum if you agree? I think that's pretty good. So I'll just confirm it. Anyone opposed? Nobody's opposed.
I'd like to see more support for people who don't want the last post to actually.
Yeah, so I was going to post to the mail, mail, you know what I mean, the mile mail group. The but I think, saying that we had support here in the room, I could just say if anybody's opposed to speak up, or you want me to say support or not.
I think that would be good. I think some of us should also do some outreach to make sure we have incident responders that will actually use it engaged. So I will help with that.
Okay.
And there's a number of other people that help with LACNIC and coordination here. So like Carlos Martinez. I'll try to help make these connections because it's only valuable if we're going to have people using it, right?
Yep. Fully agree. Well, if you want to send me the connections, but at minimum, I'll send out the email to Mile.
Okay, great.
To say
And
that
if
we will
somebody, I guess too, with this work, if somebody's willing to go present it there at one of their meetings, I can help arrange that as well. So it'd be a trip to South America. I'm sure Take would love that with the flight that would involve for him.
Okay.
That was
I
sarcasm.
can present in Spanish, but I.
Oh, no, English is fine. I have presented multiple times at their CSERT group.
Okay.
Yep, destinations are usually wonderful. But you can present in English, and they have full translation to English when there's a presenter in Spanish. So you wear an earpiece, yes. Yeah, it's very well done. But that might help as well, just so we have additional real customers. And then maybe the CSERT group that was located here from the last time we met in Prague, they also had something related in JSON that wasn't quite IODEF, but was close. So I think we should re-engage them, at least for reviews. All right, so we'll talk and figure out who might be able to take a trip to South America. I
Okay.
think the next destination was good too.
Thanks. Oh, that's Central America, but close enough. Close enough.
Okay, so everything is set. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Taki. Okay. So any order of business before we go into TLS updates and discussion? Nope. Okay. Kathleen, would you mind?
Sure. Kathleen Moriarty, SecAD. How many people are following TLS? Okay. How many people in the room do incident response work or have done it? Okay. So I was hoping some of the folks would be able to attend that are trying to get their use cases solved. This is really just a request. I don't think we got all the people in the room I was hoping would show up so that we could have a discussion to help them. But on the TLS list, TLS 1.3, maybe I'll stand over in front. So I can see. So TLS 1.3 enables perfect forward secrecy, and it is going to remove properties that people have leveraged in the past, like using RSA static keys to intercept traffic. So this obviously affects the way some enterprises operate today and some products in their implementations. There is, and this is, it goes in line with 7258 and that we're trying to do better with encryption, and the working group, had a firm decision on that. So there's a proposal that enables the use of Diffie-Hellman static keys as their short term for it. That's going to be presented on Wednesday, and the mailing list is just completely blown up. Hundreds of messages in the last couple of days discussing the use. So it started from a use case discussion of what this actually helps with, except that just trying to think of the best way to say this. So the use cases weren't clear enough and weren't crisp enough and weren't narrow to exactly the problems that were solved with this particular draft. So I was hoping to get some incident responders engaged, because incident response was thrown there as a general, and I've tried to help with the conversation, and I do have the experience to know what this is, but a few more incident responders people with experience may help. So basically, if you own the server, you can use this technique to monitor traffic with a key. So basically decrypt the traffic going to that particular server that you own anyway. So you have that capability. You do not have the capability to monitor other people's servers because you would not have that key. And the current proposal doesn't let the client know that this is happening, although I suspect that's going to change for it to go forward. So there's a narrow set of use cases. It's been put a bit larger. So I'm just hoping there's a few people. It may not be worth having a discussion here unless people are interested, but I'm just looking for some help because it's being argued that people don't have the experience. Now, it's been a few years since I've been hands-on, but I do understand how this stuff works, and I know a bunch of you do too. So I'd say read up on the Diffie-Hellman proposal and at least the initial messages in the use case thread, and they're supposed to come out with an updated example of updated set of use cases. So if you respond, please do it so in a helpful way and professional way, so it advances that conversation. So otherwise, I'm afraid that conversation is going to take a really long time. So it's just really kind of a plea for help from experts.
Dave Woltmeyer, would one way of tackling this be to enumerate some of the use cases in an informational draft and then
No.
have the IETF provide guidelines on how to address the concerns?
I don't think that's necessary. No, we don't need a draft. So I think just an email is going to be just fine for this purpose. And the proponents are already working on that. But helpful responses to tone it down in professional ways. I think the messages have been professional enough on the list, but making sure it stays that way and that they're getting sound advice from people who have the hands-on experience is kind of what I'm looking for, because there's some presupposing that people don't have experience. So I know some of you do.
Brett Jordan, I made this comment earlier today in the TLS meeting. For the record, I am very much for encryption, and I think privacy is a very important thing. I do have concerns with these proposals that are coming out of the TLS working group, not just this one, but also the encrypted SNI. And I think it sets up for a very dangerous precedent. As organizations historically have tried to protect their networks through middle box technology to be able to find malicious content or data going out or whatever, however you want to look at it. With some of these technologies that are coming down the pipe with TLS 1.3 specifically, is we're going to get to a point where every middle box is, whether it's a Cisco ASA firewall or whether it's a Palo Alto firewall or who knows what, they're going to have to do full TLS proxy. And some of these devices are not very good at it in the vendor space. And so if I was a threat actor, these devices are now going to become the prime target for everything that I do. Because now it's like historically you were able to do, some basic inspection and you were able to say, oh, all the Amazon traffic, all the stuff you're buying with credit card information, well, we're not going to decrypt that. Or all of the banking traffic, we're not going to decrypt that. And now you're going to get to a situation where these devices are going to take a huge performance hit because they're going to have to do full TLS proxy. And now as a threat actor, that's my number one target because it's going to have everything in the clear. And I think we need to make sure we're very conscientious about the risk and our appetite for risk. And so.
Right. So encrypted SNI, is anyone familiar with that? Just because that's a whole big. SNI is used by devices to basically see the host name, essentially. Now, I think there's some mitigators for that, and I think that if it goes forward in the working group, I'm not taking any position, by the way. If the working group decides that SNI should be encrypted, then there has to be clear notifications to server operators so that they understand whether or not they should encrypt SNI for their particular service. And banks, for instance, might opt to not encrypt SNI so that their traffic is not intercepted by proxies. So, I see that as a reality. I'm sure some people will pull that trigger immediately. I'm hoping we can get to better guidance, though, before we jump to that, and that we're able to put more good information out in terms of, real use cases, mitigating factors, pros, cons, and come to good decisions with good information. I think there are ways to do encryption and push this all forward. So help from people with experience is much appreciated. Anything else? It's probably okay.
A little unusual with the conversation.
All right. I think that's all we had on the agenda, unless there's any other business you guys want to raise. If not, please chime in on the emails that will be coming on the mile working group. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of IETF.
Yeah.
You go to the jeans again, right? Oh, blue sheets, make sure if you haven't signed the blue sheet, come on up.